So that means we have really wide spanning artifact, almost spanning the whole bottle here. So this is done using gradient echo scans, some parameters. It's not so important to go through this. So, and to compare the imaging and the simulation, we did similar parameters and similar objects. So here we have a gradient echo scan of a 3 mm steel sphere, and we have here the simulation of the same object in the same setting. So as we can see, there are still some differences, of course, but in general, it matches quite okay. We are not yet finished with this simulation. There are certain parameters which we didn't simulate yet, but we are on the way. And this is a spin echo sequence, the same particle. So we see the artifact is looking quite different, but the simulation, well, not perfect, but it is in the right direction. The problem is that the simulation of MRI image formation is quite time-consuming and quite some effort. So what we are doing more, we are trying to segment the artifacts so that we can extract geometrical features, so that we can later find them in images, even if we don't know a priori where they are, the particles. So this is a segmentation of gradient echo artifact of a 2 mm steel ball. And as we can see, it has a certain characteristic shape. And this is very, very important if we want to find it later in the images. And another thing, what we are working on, the problem what we have is that all these experiments, what we did up to now, are of big particles, millimeter size. So we cannot steer them through the cardiovascular system, of course. So the idea is to agglomerate small nanoparticles. And the question was, do they behave for the imaging in the same way like the solid particles? Because if we have few 10 or 100 nanometer size particles somewhere, we cannot see them with the MRI, except for, contrast agents are nanoparticles. So if we put it, we get a signal loss, but we don't know exactly where is the single particle or where is like this. So the idea was to use them to agglomerate and to stick together. And in this case, this is a segmentation of an artifact of an agglomerate. So we took a ferrofluid with 10 nanometer size particles and put it inside. It's constrained to a very small space. And we found out that at least under certain circumstances, this group of nanoparticles, very many nanoparticles, is behaving in the same way like a solid particle. As we can see here, we have still the artifact, we have a characteristic shape, and the size, of course, is smaller than a solid particle, but it's still big. So we can still find it in the images, which is very important if we want to control a group of nanoparticles, of course. So what is going on else? Apart from the imaging, partners in Europe have developed simulation system to simulate the functionalization and design, the fabrication of nanoparticles. So we are working on different kind of nanoparticles. We have here, for example, a spherical nanoparticle functionalized with some biomolecules. We have here a carbon nanotube, which is filled with ferromagnetic material and is functionalized with some molecules. And we have here, again, a carbon nanotube, which is filled then with a chemotherapeutic agent, for example. So the goal is, with this simulation, to find out what is a feasible way of first producing it, and which will allow us at the same time later to control it in some way in the MRI. So, and for that, there have been quite some simulations going on. For example, here, the carbon nanotube single-walled carbon nanotube, which is functionalized with peptides, and then the interaction of the carbon nanotube with biological tissue, for example. And the results have been quite promising, but we are still quite far. We have to go still. And at the same time, what has been simulated is the encapsulation of chemotherapeutics or drugs inside these carbon nanotubes, how to do it if they would fit inside, and how much effort it has to be to produce them. But still, it's possible, and well, we are on the way of doing that. So, and what is going on further? Of course, we are also trying to produce them, not only simulate them. We simulated them in the consortium, but there are also approaches to produce exemplary nanoparticles with different functions, of course, like some functionalization to target the cancer cells, some ferromagnetic material, some drug inside, and so on. And what we're doing more is we're working on diagnostics, MRI-based diagnostics, to improve the use of this MRI as one system, not only for diagnosis, but like for the whole cycle of diagnostics and therapy. Then, of course, we're working on the magnetic steering of the particles, where there is one problem: we cannot steer really small nanoparticles if they are alone, because just there is some scaling effects in the forces. So we have to agglomerate them to behave like one big particles. But we're working on that. And we're working on path planning. So we extract the cardiovascular system from MRI images and try to determine the best possible path for a particle to go to a desired goal, like a tumor. Yeah, and something to the demonstration scenarios which we're going to work on. First of all, we want to try it in phantoms, human-sized phantoms, to recognize and track the objects, the ferromagnetic particles. Then propulsion along a pre-planned path. And in a second phase, we want to do that in an animal to just verify that it's possible and doable. And in a phase 3, we will first evaluate the toxicity in cell cultures, not in animals, not in any living being, but so that we can be sure that it works in the way that we want it to be. So just some short words about the consortium in this project. So we are 8 partners who are working on that in Europe. University of Orléans is the coordinator. Then we have Xenon, which is a company from Greece, ETH Zurich, University of Oldenburg, where I'm from, the Biomedical Research Foundation from Greece, University of Cyprus, Femtotools, which is a small company in Zurich also, and the Pius Hospital Oldenburg as a medical partner. Okay, and thank you for your attention, and I'm open for questions.